Dante Johnson sat on the edge of his worn-out mattress, the springs beneath him groaning under his shifting weight. His one-room apartment smelled of stale air and overdue decisions. The eviction notice, yellowed at the edges, clung to the wall like a final warning. Final notice. Payment due in 3 days, the words burned in his mind. He had exhausted every favor, every borrowed dollar, and now the walls were closing in. He rubbed his temples, staring at his phone. The job rejections piled up in his inbox, each email another nail in the coffin of his pride. He had done everything, applied for warehouse work, busboy shifts, even night security. Nothing had come through. His girlfriend, Keisha, had been understanding, but even her patience had limits. A knock at the door broke the silence. He hesitated, knowing who it was. With a deep breath, he pulled the door open. Vanessa Carter stood there, arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her forearm. His landlady was effortlessly stunning, with caramel skin that seemed to glow even under the dim hallway light. She was in her late 30s, but time had been kind. Her dark eyes studied him, sharp and knowing. "You know why I'm here, Dante." His throat felt dry. "Yeah, I know." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The faint scent of expensive perfume trailed her, contrasting sharply with the musty air of his apartment. She glanced around, at the unwashed dishes in the sink, the pile of unopened bills on the counter, then turned back to him. "Mr. Reynolds is pressuring me about your rent," she said, closing the door behind her. "He's threatening to cut me off if I don't collect. And frankly, I can't cover for you anymore." Dante exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Vanessa, I just need a little more time. I'm trying, I swear." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Trying isn't enough when money is due. You're a smart guy, Dante, but smart doesn't pay rent." Silence stretched between them. He felt the weight of his situation pressing down on his chest. Vanessa sighed and stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There might be another way," she said, each word deliberate. Dante frowned. "What do you mean?" She leaned against the counter, watching him carefully. "You're a good-looking young man," she said smoothly. "And I think we can come to an arrangement that benefits both of us." His pulse quickened. He understood her meaning instantly, but hearing it out loud would make it real. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. "You're married," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He smirked. "And my husband is rarely home." Dante stepped back, as if distance could make the conversation disappear. His entire life, he had been taught that dignity was worth more than a quick escape, that shortcuts led to dead ends. But dignity didn't keep the lights on. It didn't keep a roof over his head. She moved closer, her voice softer now, almost persuasive. "Think about it, Dante. You get to stay here, no stress, no pressure. Just mutual understanding." A war raged inside him, pride against survival, morality against desperation. Finally he exhaled, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to think." Vanessa studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Don't take too long," she said, turning toward the door. "Time's running out." As the door clicked shut behind her, Dante stood frozen in place, his world shifting beneath him. The choice loomed, heavier than the eviction notice still taped to the wall. And for the first time in weeks, the cold fear of homelessness wasn't the only thing keeping him awake. Dante barely slept that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind looping through the same thoughts. The choice Vanessa had offered him wasn't just a way out. It was a betrayal, a risk, a line he wasn't sure he could cross. And yet, the cold reality remained. In 3 days he'd be on the street. By morning his phone was buzzing. "Isha." He hesitated before answering. "Hey, you sound terrible," she said. Her voice was warm but laced with concern. "You didn't sleep." Dante sat up, running a hand over his face. "Not really. You hear back from any jobs?" Silence stretched between them. His throat tightened. He hated lying to her, but the truth felt heavier than he could carry. Not yet, he muttered. Keisha sighed. Baby, I know this is hard, but you gotta keep pushing. Something's gonna come through. He wanted to believe her. But belief didn't change the fact that his wallet was empty, that he had nowhere else to go. I'll figure it out, he said, his voice hollow. Then, softly, I love you, Dante. His grip on the phone tightened. I love you too. After the call ended, he sat in silence, staring at the eviction notice still taped to the wall. A knock at the door snapped him out of his thoughts. Vanessa. She leaned against the doorframe, dressed in a silky black blouse and fitted jeans, her perfume wrapping around him like a whisper. Have you thought about my offer? Dante's jaw clenched. I have. And his pulse pounded. He felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one step forward would change everything. His pride screamed at him to say no. But his empty stomach, his overdue rent, and the fear of sleeping on the streets whispered something else. He swallowed hard. I'll do it. A slow smile spread across Vanessa's lips. Good. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The air between them shifted, thick with unspoken agreement. This stays between us, she said. No one finds out. Dante nodded. Understood. Vanessa reached out, fingers trailing along his jaw before tilting his chin up so their eyes met. Then let's not waste time. At that moment Dante knew. There was no turning back. Dante woke to the sound of his phone vibrating against the nightstand. The room was dim, the afternoon sun barely filtering through the drawn curtains. His body felt heavy, tangled in the expensive silk sheets that weren't his. Vanessa lay beside him, her breathing slow and steady, her bare shoulder exposed beneath the covers. The scent of her perfume still lingered in the air, mingling with the weight of what they had done. His phone buzzed again. Isha. Guilt shot through him like a blade. He hesitated, then grabbed the phone and slid out of bed, careful not to wake Vanessa. Stepping into the bathroom, he shut the door behind him before answering. Hey, he said, his voice hoarse. Hey yourself, Keisha replied, the warmth in her voice making his stomach twist. I called earlier. You busy? Dante glanced at his reflection in the mirror. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held the truth. He had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Yeah, I was out running errands. The lie came too easily, and he hated himself for it. Keisha sighed, but there was no suspicion in it. Just concern. Get it, baby. I know things are rough right now. Just, let me in, okay? We're in this together. Dante closed his eyes. If only she knew. I will, he murmured. I promise. After they hung up, he leaned against the sink, gripping the edges so tightly his knuckles turned white. His reflection stared back at him, hollow and unrecognizable. Soft knock on the bathroom door. You okay? Vanessa's voice was thick with sleep. Dante forced himself to breathe. Just a call. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Stepping out, he found her sitting up, the sheets draped around her, one shoulder bare. She studied him for a moment before tilting her head. Regrets already. He shook his head, but they both knew it was a lie. Vanessa smirked, patting the spot beside her. You knew what this was. Dante sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his short curls. Yeah, he said, his voice quieter now. I did. She leaned in, pressing a slow kiss against his shoulder. Then don't think too much. But thinking was all he could do. His rent was covered. He wouldn't be on the street. But at what cost? As Vanessa traced circles against his back, he realized something chilling. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning.